Southwest, close to 11.
Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray approved, and are you transitioning in VFR condition?
VFR condition 1,500, 2 Echoes.
Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray, thank you. Contact SoCal now 134.2 for flight following 34-2.
34-2.
X-ray ident.
What you're hearing is the air traffic controller talking to the pilot of the helicopter, and what he said was ident, which is basically asking the helicopter to identify itself. Normal response is for the pilot to press his transponder, which would allow the air traffic controller to make the association between the pilot that he's talking to and what he sees on his radar.
So X-ray, yeah, you're still on a 1200 code. Are you requesting flight following? 2 Echo X-ray, what is the intention? 2 Echo X-ray, you're still too low level for flight following at this time. 2 Echo X-ray, SoCal.
This is the repainted Sikorsky S-76 helicopter, tail number November 72 Echo X-ray. In this video, I'm going to give you the latest update on the helicopter and the crash. So we're going to talk about the flight path, the safety record, the weather conditions, and also we're going to review some crashes that happened in this helicopter in the past. My name is Carlisle, and I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. I was part of the 56 Fighter Wing, where we featured 170 F-16 aircraft as well as 200 instructors, and we cross-trained with these stealth fighters. Always loved aviation from I was a little child. In fact, I joined the Civil Air Patrol when I was about 14 years old, which is an auxiliary of the United States Air Force. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high. I'm sorry, I had to break out the Air Force anthem. Hoorah! Anyway, let's get to the video. Right after you click on that like button. Thank you. So the question that people have been asking me is, how dangerous is this helicopter? Should this helicopter be grounded because of what happened? Now, let's get straight to it. A lot of people are jumping the gun and jumping to conclusions, and I'm going to show you how a lot of what is being said is incorrect. And you have other people that are talking about, oh, this is some kind of Illuminati plot, it's a distraction from the virus, zombies, blah, 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 nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. This is Carlisle's Picks, this is my aviation series, and I'm going to give you everything you need to know about this helicopter, the crash, and all the latest updates as quickly as I can, as concisely as I can, straight to the point. So let's get right to it. So the first update is that unfortunately 9 people have died. Originally, I had reported that 5 people had died. That was the original number, but now we know that it's 9 people, including Kobe Bryant, as well as his 13-year-old daughter. Tragically, they did not survive. No one survived. And this is not the first time that we've had 100% casualties in this particular aircraft. However, the safety record of this particular helicopter is in direct contrast to what a lot of people have been saying online. And I understand people are angry and upset, and there's a lot of misinformation floating around, but what you're being told about this aircraft as far as it being dangerous is absolutely incorrect. I've done the research and it is not true. This aircraft actually has a very good safety record, and we'll cover that more in detail in this video. Stay with me. I have been absolutely flooded by your comments, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments and questions, and I'm going to try to address every single question in a single video. Well, I'll do my best. Question number 1 is, tell me about the aircraft that was involved in the crash. So the aircraft that crashed was a Sikorsky S-76. It featured a twin turboshaft engine, or twin turboshaft engines, 4-bladed main and tail rotors, and retractable landing gear. Top speed 178 miles per hour, range 472 miles per hour. a wingspan of 44 feet and a cruising speed of 155 miles per hour, and a price tag of $13 million. But this particular aircraft actually cost a lot less money, and we're going to talk next about the details of the specific aircraft. Tail number November 72, Echo X-ray. That's going to be our next question. What can you tell me about the actual aircraft involved in the crash? The specific helicopter was a Sikorsky S-76B. So there are several models. I think there's about 7 different variants of the S-76, but this is this S-76B or S-76 Bravo. Produced from 1991 to 2020, but this specific aircraft was built in 1991. So this is not a brand new aircraft at all. So that's why you're not going to get the $13 million price tag that you would get from a brand new edition of this particular aircraft. This edition, serial number 760379, built in 1991, was originally painted like this, later repainted like this, and this is how it looked when Kobe flew on this aircraft. Here's a look at the cockpit. Very, very different from the modern S-76 helicopters, which have a very impressive glass cockpit, as opposed to this, which has a lot of old school analog gauges. But again, this was 1991. So the S-76 usually features 2 pilots, and as you can see, there's a lot of space in the back for passengers. So in this particular crash, there were 9 fatalities, originally reported to be 5 fatalities, and that's another question people have been asking. It's actually 9 people. So unfortunately, Kobe Bryant died, and also his daughter died, along with 7 other individuals, which include the pilots. Here are those 2 rear-facing seats from a different angle. Another shot of the aircraft. Next question. Let's talk about the history of this aircraft in terms of geographically speaking. So again, the origins of this particular helicopter started in Illinois. As you can see here, in 2007, Springfield, Illinois. It was located at the Abraham Lincoln Capitol Airport. Then later Long Beach, Palm Springs, Camarillo, Livermore, Santa Ana in Orange County, and then the last flight was in Los Angeles, California on January 26, 2020. In 2007, the airframe had logged 3,951 hours. It was sold December 2014 in the state of Illinois in an online auction. And then it was reported under Island Express Holding Corp. At Van Nuys, California. So Van Nuys is a very popular airport in the, or close to the Beverly Hills area. So pretty much any of the celebrities that you know probably frequent Van Nuys a lot, just because of the proximity. So obviously no one wants to deal with Los Angeles traffic. So rather than going to LAX and dealing with all that nonsense, getting there and then actual hassles at the airport, you can go straight to Van Nuys and you can get into, private jets, helicopters, whatever it is, and get where you need to go. And in fact, that brings us to the next question. What was Kobe doing in this helicopter? So the purpose of being in the helicopter was essentially to avoid traffic. Unfortunately, traffic in Los Angeles is pretty horrific. Even for someone like myself who rides motorcycles, we're able to actually ride between lanes in California, which can be a convenience, but the traffic can be so bad that even on a motorcycle, it's just too much at times. So certainly someone like Kobe doesn't really have a lot of time to be dealing with traffic. He has worked really hard and earned the ability to not have to deal with that. So hence he travels by helicopter to go in between his home and Los Angeles. The next question is, where did the crash occur? So the crash occurred in Santa Ana, John Wayne, Orange County, in the Calabasas, Los Angeles County area. So the next question is, what was the specific flight path of the helicopter. So here you can see the ground speed was 153 knots, and the path was from Orange County to El Monte. You can see here right between Irvine and Huntington Beach, flying north through Los Angeles and then heading southwest into the Calabasas area where the helicopter actually crashed. Calabasas is a very well-known area where there are a lot of very wealthy people. Currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is 7:29 p.m. there, 10:30 Eastern Standard. And you'll see a lot of houses like that there. So here's Calabasas. If we zoom out, we can see where it is in relation to Los Angeles. There you have Arizona. Zoom out even further. For those of you not familiar with the United States, it's obviously California on the West Coast. And here is a better view to let you know where it is in relation to the United States in general. So the southwestern tip of the United States in sunny Southern California. So if you go to flightradar24.com, you can find out more details about the actual crash. Once again, there is the flight path through Burbank and down into Calabasas. Additionally, we can see a speed and altitude graph. So the yellow line represents the speed of the aircraft, and the blue line represents the altitude. So you can see the speed pretty much was mostly close to the cruising speed of this particular aircraft. So right here you can see it's averaging about 150 knots. So that will be about 172.6 miles per hour for reference. And then you can see the speed dropped pretty sharply here to just above 50 knots, which would be about 57.5 miles per hour. So kind of a slow hover. I don't have any flight training with helicopters, so I apologize if I'm not using the correct terms. So it kind of hovered for a little bit there in the middle of the flight, and then the speed rose pretty sharply around 1732 and was pretty consistent up until just before the crash. We can see the speed drops a little bit there. So let's take a closer look at that. So we can see just before the crash, the speed starts to drop a little bit and then rise really quickly at the final moments of the flight, which would obviously be expected with a crash type scenario. An additional detail to note is the altitude, which we can see slowly rising and continuing to rise as time goes by, probably due to the mountainous areas that they were flying through. But pretty much a steady increase in altitude over time, pretty consistent. And then at the very end, we see a very sharp rise. So this line here represents 1,000 feet, and this line here represents 2,000 feet. So we can see a sharp rise from, let's say, 1,100, 1,200 feet, rising very rapidly to about 2,100 feet, perhaps, just estimating. And then a rapid fall to about 1,500 feet, and then we don't have any more data after that. So the first signal for the helicopter was received at 1706 UTC. So that is Coordinated Universal Time. For reference, currently on the East Coast, it is 10:36 p.m. and in UTC time, it is 3:36 a.m. So 1706 UTC would represent in Pacific time 9:06 a.m. So a quick conversion here, 1706 UTC, you just add 4 hours to that. So 1706 being 5:06 UTC, add 4 hours to that. So 5:06, 6:06, 7:06, 8:06, 9:06. So that would be 9:06 Pacific Standard Time. So 9:06 Pacific Standard to 9:45 Pacific Standard Time. So this is like a mid-morning flight. So below, we're looking at the ADS-B data. So it shows us the altitude, ground speed, and vertical speed. As we can see, mid-flight, the vertical speed just falls and falls and falls until the end of the flight, the ground speed is pretty consistent, and then it starts to rise towards the end of the flight and is at its highest just before the crash. So this data is downloadable. If you are interested, I will put a link in the description to flightradar24.com so you can download the CSVs if you so choose. Another question people have been asking is, what was the weather like? They're wondering if maybe the weather was the reason for the crash. Well, I caution you, please wait until the investigators have time to investigate and give you more details about what's actually happening. But there's no problem with you wondering about what may have happened. That's fine. We can talk about that, but just be careful about jumping to conclusions. Let's let the professionals do their work and get back to us and let us know what they believe happened. But as far as the weather conditions, I'm going to quote someone who lives in the area who said, quote unquote, "It was a foggy morning with visibility at less than 60 feet. I looked towards a nearby window in my Calabasas home and heard a massive boom, followed by a few seconds of silence. Then a fireball erupted on a hillside of Los Virgenes Road. In the ensuing minutes, a stream of firefighters arrived to tackle the fire." He added, "I was able to make it closer to the crash site where I saw debris strewn across the hillside, still smoldering." A bystander, Jerry Cochran, told Winton that he was outside drinking coffee when he saw a helicopter flying real low. "I saw it falling and sputtering," he said, "but it was hard to make out as it was so foggy." So someone on the ground, again, reporting that the conditions were fairly foggy at that time, low visibility. So some additional questions that people have asked me is about, again, the conditions, also the pilot and his experience level. So the pilot who was flying the aircraft was very familiar with this area and had been flying Bryant or Kobe Bryant for quite some years. So this was not a novice pilot at all. I believe the pilot's name was Zobayan, and he's been a holder of a commercial license since 2007, and he was qualified to fly in bad weather like the conditions where the crash occurred. He was also a qualified instructor as well. So I'm being told that the pilot was actually flying VFR, which is basically visual flight rules. And to do this, what was required, or what would be required, is for him to fly low enough so he could actually see the ground. So he would need to fly, obviously, below cloud cover. Now, flying above the clouds and in the clouds using IFR, which is instrument flight rules, he would be able to actually use his instrumentation in the aircraft to actually be able to navigate and see around and avoid hazards. But flying VFR, which is visual flight rules, again, he is using essentially his eyesight. So he's looking out of the cockpit and getting his situational awareness of where he is in orientation to the ground and obstacles. So this again would require him to be fairly low, which would explain why he might have been flying as low as he was and might have contributed to the actual crash. A probable theory is flying really low, trying to establish VFR or visual flight rules. If it was really bad conditions where you really can't see very far at all, he could have easily lost his bearings to where you're flying super low, you can't really see much, you're not really sure where you are, you're a little bit disoriented. Hopefully you reduce your speed so that you increase your reaction time. It's a similar thing that we do with motorcycles when we're riding at night. You want to reduce your speed so you don't, what we call, overrun your headlights, because you need to be able to have reaction time. So the distance at which you can see you need to be able to stop within that distance, because that's the maximum amount of time that you're going to have in terms of being alerted that there's a hazard. So a similar concept would apply to a helicopter pilot flying in VFR conditions like this pilot would have been. So he would have had a limited sight distance in terms of how far away he can see. So ideally, if he got disoriented, he would want to reduce his speed. And my experience is more with fixed aircraft, or fixed wing aircraft, not with helicopters like this. But similar principles apply to where he would, just like on the motorcycle at night, he would have a limited sight distance, and he would have a sort of estimated reaction time. So, he's flying at a certain speed and he sees an object ahead. He would need time to recognize the hazard. He would need time to come up with an escape trajectory to avoid the hazard. He would need time to execute that change in flight path or altitude, or both, and then complete it. So if you are flying at too high of a speed based on your sight distance, then you see something, you establish that it's a hazard and you need to react. Then your mind considers what your options are to avoid this hazard. And I know I'm saying this slowly. This will happen very, very fast, especially for a trained pilot. So this will be something that would occur in mere seconds. See the hazard, consider options, and then execute whatever maneuver you need to get away from the hazard. So whether it's raising your altitude, which is the most likely strategy that he would have employed in this particular case. Obviously, I wasn't there. I don't know what was happening. So obviously a lot of pure speculation here, but most logical, a helicopter flying that low, the safest option would be to raise your altitude, because the likelihood of an obstacle being directly above the helicopter is pretty low. I mean, for that to happen, he would have had to be flying so low that he goes under something like a bridge. And I don't know of any bridges that would be out there in Calabasas, so there really wouldn't be anything above the helicopter. Another helicopter, of course, is a possibility, but that's not very likely. Now, in terms of going to the left or going to the right, or simply stopping, there could be a mountain or some object. Again, it depends on how low the pilot was at that particular time, but an easy escape route would have been to raise the altitude. And again, I'm not a helicopter pilot, but I would think also it would be a combined maneuver of a drastic reduction in forward or ground speed, and at the same time raising of the altitude. So a drastic reduction in forward momentum, at the same time pitching the aircraft up and away from the obstacle. But an additional thing to consider is that, in my opinion, a helicopter is considerably more complex aircraft to fly than a fixed wing aircraft. Just the very art of hovering, to me, I just feel that's going to be a little bit more of complicated, a little bit more multitasking, because you have your main rotor on top, which is controlling your altitude, as well as your ability to control your forward speed, so going faster, going forward, going backwards, stopping. And then you also have your tail rotor, which helps to keep the aircraft pointed in the direction that you want to. Because if you did not have the tail rotor, then the helicopter would just be spinning out of control because of the momentum of the rotors above. So you've got a lot of things going on. The pitch of the rotor, I believe with the tail rotor, I believe it's called your collective, but don't quote me on that. But it's a coordinated balance between your altitude, your forward momentum, and your rotation. And you've got all that going on, and being able to adjust all of that to do an abrupt maneuver at the last minute. Now, this is a trained pilot, and he would have had a lot of training in terms of dealing with emergency situations, and I'm pretty sure he knew his way around the helicopter. But just from a person who is more familiar with fixed wing aircraft, I definitely have a lot of respect for helicopter pilots because, yeah, maybe one day I'll try it out, but let's just say this is an extreme example of the whole walk and chew gum scenario. Multitasking galore. Guys, I gotta apologize. I have been having a super hectic last couple of weeks. I work in finance and I'm working on some pretty big projects. I'm really overwhelmed. So yet again, I have to continue this in another video, and I'm going to actually move this to my aviation channel. I don't want to bombard my main channel, which is Carlisle's Picks, where I talk about my favorite things. So exotic cars, jets, which is part of the aviation series. So, and I also cover marine, so yachts, and also electronics, technology, and also travel. So I'm covering this as part of my aviation series because aviation is one of my many passions, and this channel is where I share my passions and I recommend products and services here on Carlisle's Picks. But I'm going to move the follow-up video where we're going to go over the accident history on this aircraft and the safety record. And any new updates that I find out, I'm going to put it there on the Carlisle's Picks aviation channel. So if you are really into aviation like I am, you can go over and head over there to Carlisle's Picks aviation channel. You're welcome to subscribe here as well if you so choose. If you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. Click on the like button, subscribe, and smash that bell so you get notified of future videos right here on Carlisle's Picks. Thank you for watching. Be safe, and condolences to the family members who lost their loved ones in this tragic crash. I recently lost someone myself, and I know what it is to lose someone and to go through this kind of tragedy. So I would never wish this on anyone. Everyone, live every day like it's your last day. We are not promised tomorrow. Whatever plans you have, stop planning on and get it done. Make sure you take time out to let the ones that you love know you love them. Stop thinking that you always have time. I'll do it later. No, don't take time for granted. I remember a story just last year where a guy was walking with his wife or his girlfriend. She turned, I think, to get an umbrella or magazine or something like that. He turned to do that actually, and then he turned around and she was dead. Some object fell from a building, killing her right on the spot. Don't take life for granted. Don't take your loved ones for granted. Tell the people that matter most in your life that they matter and that you love them, because you may not get a chance to do it again. Be well. This is Carlisle's Picks. This is the Gulfstream G550, which is a large cabin, ultra long range jet from Gulfstream. This was the previous flagship, which is now being replaced with the Gulfstream G650, which has a much larger cabin. This aircraft affords you global reach. You can pretty much go anywhere in the world with only one stop. One of the first flights that they made was a non-stop flight from Korea all the way to Florida in 14.5 hours. Non-stop. That's what you get with the Gulfstream G5.
You see this bump here, that's actually the hill over there where the house is.
Oh wow.
So it takes but fingertip inputs to fly the airplane.